It was a normal day in the life of Ethan Blackwood, the CEO of a billion-dollar corporation. Or so he thought. Little did he know, the day would mark the beginning of something that would change his life forever. For a man who had everything, wealth, power, and influence, Ethan had always prided himself on being in control. But as he reached out to shake the hand of a visiting executive, something unexpected happened. His body stiffened, a sharp pain shooting through his arm, and he quickly recoiled, his face contorting with discomfort. This wasn't a simple ache. It was as if his body was rejecting the touch of any woman. It had happened once before, but never like this. Ethan brushed it off, thinking it was a fluke, but deep down, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. Little did he know, the answer to his condition would come from the most unexpected place. A small rural village, far from the polished glass towers of the corporate world. Enter Maya, a young simple girl with a strength and resilience that seemed out of place for someone who lived in such a quiet corner of the world. She wasn't like the sophisticated women Ethan was used to associating with. No, Maya's world was filled with hard work, family, and traditions that often went unnoticed by people like him. She was unpolished, raw, and yet there was something about her that drew people in. Ethan's first encounter with Maya was pure chance. He had been feeling increasingly ill, his body reacting in strange ways to any woman's touch. Doctors had no answers, and his life had started to spiral into confusion. One fateful afternoon, in a desperate attempt to escape the corporate chaos, Ethan decided to take a trip to the countryside. It wasn't an elegant vacation, but a last-ditch effort to find some clarity. Away from the stress and pressure of his high-powered life, that's when he met Maya. She was standing by a river, her hands expertly weaving a basket from reeds. Ethan had stopped his car nearby, his vision blurry from the constant discomfort that plagued him. As he stepped out of the car, he felt that familiar ache shoot through his body again. But this time, it was different. The pain wasn't as severe. In fact, he barely noticed it when his hand brushed against Maya's as she handed him a basket she had made. The instant their hands touched, something changed. The strange sensation that had consumed his body for so long seemed to vanish, replaced by an overwhelming sense of peace. Maya noticed his confusion, but said nothing, offering him a simple smile. Ethan didn't understand it at first. How could this woman, someone so different from the women in his life, have such an effect on him? It wasn't just the absence of pain. It was something more profound. There was an energy between them, an unspoken connection that Ethan couldn't deny. As the days went on, Ethan found himself returning to the village more and more, seeking out Maya. Each time he touched her, the aching in his body would disappear. It was as though she held the key to his strange condition. But Maya, being from a small village where people didn't trust outsiders, was cautious. She didn't know who this powerful man was, or what his intentions were. To her, Ethan seemed like just another wealthy person who had lost touch with the real world. But there was something about him that intrigued her, something in his eyes that made her believe he wasn't as arrogant or cold as he appeared. As their bond deepened, Maya began to teach Ethan things he had never considered. She showed him the beauty of simplicity, the power of nature, and the strength of human connection. In return, Ethan opened up about his struggles, his fears, and the mysterious ailment that had taken hold of him. The more he learned about her life, the more he admired her. Maya had an inner strength, a kind of resilience that couldn't be broken by the challenges of life. But not everything was as it seemed. While Ethan's connection with Maya grew stronger, the ache that had plagued his body began to take a strange turn. The more time he spent with her, the more intense his feelings became. It wasn't just about his condition anymore. He was falling for her, and the powerful, self-assured CEO who had once ruled the business world was now helpless in the face of emotions he couldn't control. Maya, on the other hand, found herself torn. She had always lived in her small village, surrounded by the people she knew and loved. Ethan's world was far removed from hers, and she feared the consequences of becoming involved with a man who was not only powerful, but so different from her. She wasn't sure she could fit into his world, nor did she know if he would understand hers. But the pull between them was undeniable, and every time their hands touched, the ache in Ethan's body grew stronger, the connection between them deeper, and then, just as things seemed to be falling into place, disaster struck. Ethan's condition, which had seemed to improve in Maya's presence, took a sudden and dangerous turn. His body began to weaken, and the pain became more intense than ever before. As the days passed, it became clear that something was terribly wrong, and it wasn't just the mysterious ache. Ethan was hiding something that went beyond the physical ailment, something that could destroy everything they had built together. As Maya stood by his side, watching him struggle, she couldn't help but wonder, was their connection a blessing or a curse? Could she save him from whatever he was hiding? Or was their love doomed from the start? The tension between them was palpable, and the questions lingered in the air, unresolved. What would happen to Ethan and Maya? Was their love strong enough to overcome the mysterious forces pulling them apart? Only time would tell. And as the sun began to set over the village, the only thing they knew for sure was that their journey was far from over. As the days passed, Ethan's condition grew worse. The inexplicable ache that gripped his body whenever he touched a woman became more severe. He couldn't explain it, but it seemed as though the physical pain was now tied to his deepest fears. The more time he spent with Maya, the more he felt the grip of the ache loosen, but the more complicated his emotions became. It was as if his body couldn't decide whether to push her away or draw her closer. Every moment spent in her presence was a mix of confusion and comfort, and Ethan found himself at war with his own feelings. Maya, on the other hand, was caught between her growing affection for Ethan and the reality of their differences. She had never imagined her life could be anything other than simple, tied to the rhythms of her village, the land she tended to, and the family she loved. But with Ethan, there was a spark, a fire that ignited her heart in ways she hadn't expected. She couldn't deny the pull she felt toward him, the way his presence made her feel like she was part of something bigger than herself. Yet, deep down, a voice in her head warned her that this connection was dangerous. Ethan was a man from a world she didn't understand, one that was so far removed from hers. His life was filled with power, manipulation, and ambition, and she wondered if he would ever be able to truly fit into her world. Despite her reservations, Maya found herself visiting Ethan more often, trying to understand the pain that consumed him. But there were secrets about him, dark truths he had never shared, secrets he was desperately trying to hide from her. As they spent more time together, Maya began to notice small things. The way Ethan flinched when a woman's hand brushed against his, the way his eyes clouded over with a sense of dread when the subject of his condition came up. But every time she asked him what was really going on, Ethan would close off, retreating into a silence that only deepened her curiosity. It wasn't long before Maya's suspicions began to grow. She overheard fragments of conversations between Ethan and his business associates. There were whispers of a past filled with betrayal and heartbreak, of a woman from his past who had once held his heart, only to betray him in the most unimaginable way. Ethan had never told her about this woman. But the more Maya pieced together from the hushed conversations, the more she understood Ethan's condition wasn't just physical. It was emotional, tied to the scars of a love lost and the betrayal that followed. But there was something more. Maya had always been an intuitive person, someone who could read people and situations with ease. One day, while she was in the village tending to her family's farm, a strange visitor arrived, a man in a well-tailored suit, carrying an air of importance about him. He asked around for Ethan, claiming to be an old friend, but Maya could tell something was off. The man's eyes darted around nervously, as if he had something to hide. It was then that Maya realized that Ethan's past wasn't as clean as he had led her to believe. This visitor, she discovered, was connected to Ethan's former fiancée, the woman who had left him heartbroken. Maya's suspicions grew, but she knew she had to confront Ethan about it. Yet, when she finally brought up the subject, his reaction was not what she expected. Ethan's face went pale, his hands shaking as he tried to mask his emotions. He didn't deny the woman's existence, but he refused to talk about her. The pain in his eyes was enough to tell Maya everything she needed to know. Something had happened between them, something that had broken Ethan in a way that no one could understand. And whatever it was the reason behind his strange ailment, the reason he couldn't touch women without feeling as though his body was betraying him. But as Maya continued to press, Ethan finally broke down. He confessed that years ago, he had been deeply in love with a woman named Clara. They were engaged, their future seemingly set, until one day, without warning, Clara disappeared. Ethan had searched for her for months, but she was gone, leaving only a trail of broken promises and unanswered questions. It wasn't until years later that he discovered the truth. Clara hadn't disappeared. She had betrayed him, using him for his wealth and power, only to leave him for another man. The pain of that betrayal had broken something in him, something that had never healed. In the wake of Clara's betrayal, Ethan had become a man consumed by control. He built his empire to escape the emotional wreckage left by her departure. He buried himself in work, in power, in the illusion of perfection, all the while battling an inexplicable physical condition that seemed to have no cause. It wasn't until Maya entered his life that things began to change. For the first time in years, he felt a flicker of hope, a sense of warmth that he thought had long been lost. But now, Maya knew the truth. She knew why he couldn't touch women without feeling pain. It wasn't just the memories of Clara's betrayal. It was his heart, locked away, refusing to let anyone in. Maya's heart ached for him, but she also felt a growing sense of anger. Ethan had been through so much, but it wasn't fair for him to push her away, to keep her at arm's length because of his past. She wanted to help him, to heal him, but she didn't know how. All she could do was be there, to offer him her love and support, but she couldn't help but wonder if it would ever be enough. As the days dragged on, Ethan's condition continued to worsen. The pain was unbearable, and no amount of time spent with Maya seemed to ease it. It became clear that something needed to change. They needed to confront the past, to face the ghosts of Ethan's former life before they could have a future together. But the closer they got to the truth, the more dangerous their journey became. There were people from Ethan's past who didn't want these secrets to come to light, people who would stop at nothing to keep him trapped in his own pain. The tension between Maya and Ethan grew, and with it, the stakes. Could they face the shadows of the past together? Or would Ethan's demons tear them apart? The answers were just out of reach, and the time for decisions was running out. The tension between Ethan and Maya reached a breaking point when Ethan's condition suddenly became unbearable. The mysterious ache that had plagued him for so long flared up again, this time stronger and more intense than ever before. He could barely stand, the pain racking his body with each passing moment. It was as though something deep within him had finally snapped, and he couldn't take the weight of it any longer. But instead of pushing Maya away this time, he collapsed into her arms, unable to hold back the tears that had been building up for years. Maya, heartbroken but determined, held him close, whispering soothing words as she tried to comfort him. She had never seen him so vulnerable, so broken. She knew then that this wasn't just about Clara or his past, but about the walls Ethan had built around himself to protect his heart. His mind, scarred by betrayal, had created this physical barrier, a manifestation of his fear of being hurt again. Maya realized that he had never truly allowed himself to heal, not just from Clara's betrayal, but from the emotional wounds that had been left in their wake. In that moment, Maya made a decision. She couldn't fix everything, but she could help him heal, step by step. Ethan needed to confront his past, face the betrayal that had haunted him for so long, and most importantly, he needed to allow himself to feel love again. She wasn't going to let him push her away anymore. She wouldn't let his past rob them of a future. It wasn't easy. Ethan was reluctant, unsure of how to move forward. But with Maya by his side, he slowly began to open up. Together, they traveled to the small town where Clara had disappeared, hoping to uncover the truth once and for all. When they finally tracked down Clara, the woman who had once stolen Ethan's heart, Maya could see the difference between the man standing before her and the broken shell of the man he had been. Clara was no longer the woman Ethan had once loved. She was just a person who had made choices, wrong choices, but choices nonetheless. Confronting Clara wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about proving anything. It was about closure. Ethan needed to hear the truth, to understand why Clara had done what she did, and to let go of the weight of that betrayal. When Clara finally admitted her actions, confessing the manipulation and lies, Ethan felt a strange sense of relief. The ache in his body began to subside. The pain wasn't just physical. It had been the emotional baggage he had carried for too long, and now it was starting to fade away, piece by piece. Returning home, Ethan and Maya shared a moment of quiet understanding. There was no magic cure, no quick fix to the wounds of the past, but there was something deeper, something more important: trust. Ethan had allowed himself to trust Maya, to open his heart once again. The ache was no longer just a physical ailment. It was the manifestation of his fear of vulnerability, his fear of repeating the past. But with Maya's love, he had begun to heal, slowly but surely. The two of them had come a long way from the first day they met, from a man who couldn't even touch a woman without pain, to a man who was now willing to take the risk of love. Again, Ethan realized that love wasn't about control or perfection. It was messy, unpredictable, and sometimes painful. But it was also the most beautiful thing he could ever experience. And with Maya by his side, he was ready to embrace it fully. In the days that followed, Ethan's health continued to improve. The physical pain gradually faded away as his emotional wounds healed. He found a new sense of balance in his life, learning to navigate the challenges of love and forgiveness. He no longer viewed Maya as the woman who saved him, but as the woman he had come to love deeply, someone who had shown him that healing wasn't about forgetting the past, but about learning to live with it. Maya, too, had grown. She had learned that love was about acceptance, not perfection. She had always believed in the simple things in life: the beauty of family, the peace of nature, the joy of hard work. But she had also learned that sometimes love required stepping into the unknown, taking risks, and opening your heart to someone who might not fit your expectations. And in doing so, she had found a love deeper than she had ever imagined. Ethan and Maya stood together, looking out at the horizon. They knew their journey was far from over. They still had challenges to face, but they also had each other. They had learned that love wasn't about fixing each other, but about growing together, facing the storms, and finding strength in the moments of peace. And so, the story of Ethan and Maya didn't end with a grand gesture or a perfect conclusion. It ended with two people, broken yet stronger than before, finding a way to heal and love one another. Despite the scars of the past, they had faced their fears, uncovered their truths, and emerged from the ashes, ready to build a future. Not perfect, but perfectly theirs. For Maya, the girl from the village, and Ethan, the man who had learned to love again, the journey had only just begun.